He watched the flying fish burst out again and again, and the ineffectual movements of the bird. That school has gotten away from me, he thought. They are moving out too fast and too far. But perhaps I will pick up a stray, and perhaps my big fish is around them. My big fish must be somewhere. He took all his pain and what was left of his strength and his long-gone pride, and he put it against the fish's agony, and the fish came over onto his side and swam gently on his side, his bill almost touching the planking of the skiff, and started to pass the boat, long, deep, wide, silver, and barred with purple, and interminable in the water. Interminable? Fucking hell. It's a multi-syllabic word there, Hemingway. Watch yourself. Now you are getting confused in the head, he thought. You must keep your head clear. Keep your head clear and know how to suffer like a man. Or a fish, he thought. You know what else is interminable? This fucking novella. Published in 1952, The Old Man and the Sea tells the story of Santiago. Jesus Cristo. He is a very, very old man who hasn't caught a fish in a very, very long time. The end. He likes to talk about his left hand, his right hand, and how they can switch things around. He calls the sea a she. And he likes to keep his strength up whenever he can. Incidentally, I'm just clutching at straws for intrigue here, really. Yeah. It was Hemingway's last outing as a novel, and it followed the flop that was Across the River and Into the Trees. I've never heard of it either. But yeah, since that was pretty negatively received, when The Old Man and the Sea came out, there was a lot of praise of like, oh yeah, Hemingway's back. Oh yeah, back in business, baby, and all that kind of stuff. And then he shot his head off. So make of that what you will. But yeah, now having read it, I can certainly appreciate and understand his proclivity towards suicidal ideation. Where to begin with this one? The synopsis, maybe? I mean, that was a synopsis, basically, but I can add a few more ingredients to it if you want. There's a character called Marlin, who's a kid. They are talking quite a lot at the beginning, and they're on the dock kind of thing, or at the old man's house or hut or wherever he's staying. And I didn't really know what to make of the kid character. I suppose it demonstrated a little bit of male bonding, or a fatherly type bonding, or grandfatherly, really. But I kind of just viewed him as a bit of an exhibition dump. Like, I didn't really see if there was any. I wondered whether there was going to be any connection to the plot. But I think even before halfway through, I kind of realized, like, no, I knew it was going to have him in it again at some point, but I didn't think it was going to feel any more significant for doing so, if I'm honest. So yeah, we're at the beginning. It kind of uses this to place us in a time, an area, location. We also get a little bit of info because the old man likes his baseball, DiMaggio in particular, because DiMaggio's daddy was also a fisherman, so he feels some weird kinship with this particular baseball player. I mean, he's probably, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure, maybe aside from Babe Ruth, he's probably the most famous baseball player ever, right? I don't know. I'm British. I couldn't give a single fuck about baseball. But yeah, that didn't help when I was reading The Old Man and the Sea, because it was difficult enough going along with the very, very clippy prose and repetitive anaphoric techniques, actually, again, which is weird. I mentioned this in the last review, but this one is possibly even more guilty of it, to be honest, as was demonstrated earlier, I think. But whatever. So after we meet Manolin and we we learn that Santiago is known as a Salo or Salao. I'm probably getting that wrong, but it's an American Spanish, or South American Spanish rather, word for unlucky. And yeah, well, clearly we don't really need to know that because it's been fucking ages since he caught a fish. So yeah, we kind of got that idea. And that was just another instance of Hemingway throwing a Spanish word into the mix, which I'm still perplexed as to why he bothers doing that personally. If someone can enlighten me, please do, because it's just baffling overall. Especially, I mean, yeah, okay, it establishes that Santiago is Cuban. Right. But we didn't, you could do that in a different way. And plus, just having La Brisa or Dios or whatever doesn't actually establish the nationality of our character. Is actually in, I think, the prose itself at some point, but whatever. And yeah, so the old dude sets off to sea, as is his routine. Like, this is just what he does. He's been doing it all his life, presumably. And when he gets out there, he catches sight of this marlin fish, which has been, you know, his goal all of his life, apparently. Or maybe for the last, like, I don't know, 3 months or whatever it is. And yeah, I mean, in somewhat a determined fashion, he goes after it. There's a lot of filler around this part where he's just trying to figure out how he can try and entice it by using sardines and tuna and stuff like that as kind of bait to lure him in. Eventually, the marlin takes the bait, but then because of its size and because the old man isn't exactly in his prime, he knows he's not going to be able to reel it in. I mean, I don't even think he'd be able to do it in his prime, in all honesty, because this marlin fish is supposedly like 18 foot long. It's a big bastard, basically. And so it becomes a kind of war of attrition between this old dude and this fish, and where each one of them are kind of waiting the other out to see if they'll buckle. And yeah, one can make their escape whilst the other catches his prize. This just goes round and round in circles. The old man just keeps going on about preserving his strength. He talks about, oh, maybe I should say some Hail Marys or Blessed Our Fathers or whatever. We just kind of go around in circles, as they do, because the fish kind of goes under for a while, then they kind of circle back. Then some other bird will come along, and then the old man will be like, oh, what are you doing here, bird? All this kind of thing. And eventually, the old man prevails, and he does kill the marlin fish. But then he, as we already knew, is too weak to actually pull it into his boat. So he has to tie it to the side. And he starts to make his way home. And lo and behold, because he had to batter the marlin fish a bit, the blood has got into the sea and the sharks have got a scent of what's going on. Oh no. The old man, even though apparently he was too weak before, musters up enough strength to fight off about 3 fucking sharks. Which, I have to admit, that was probably my favourite part of the novella, if I was to pick one, because at least it was moderately exciting. Like, and it was like, okay, what's he going to try and do to, you know, overcome these lions of the sea, if you will. And he obviously his weapons start to decrease because they break when he uses them to like fucking stab him in the eye and reach through the brain. It's a little bit violent, I suppose, or graphic in its depiction. That's probably why I enjoyed it, because it was like, finally something's actually happening. But eventually the sharks overcome him, or just ignore his attempts to, you know, get rid of them by sheer number. And during the process, hitherto, they've already like bitten off, you know, a lot of the marlin fish. So there's fuck all left by the end of it, apart from a skeleton. And that's when the old man arrives back at the dock, and in his failure, he just goes off to bed and has a dream about lions in Africa. I actually thought the novel was going to end when he got home and the fish is just there, but there's just the bones, and his like failure just makes him. I thought he was going to die, actually, if I'm honest, but Hemingway doesn't even give him that courtesy or mercy. Instead, the boy from the beginning, so it kind of bookends it, goes to visit him, and then somehow the fisherman's like, oh my God, it's like 18 foot. I don't know why a Cuban guy sounds like a weird American, but that's how it was in my head. And the reason for that as well is because this is why I don't understand the usage of Spanish words, because though it adds a little bit of like flavor, I suppose, to the prose, it's like, if this guy is Cuban, why the fuck would he suddenly break into the odd Spanish word if we're being told he's thinking in English? I just don't really get what Hemingway's doing here, if I'm honest. Maybe I'm probably overthinking it a bit, but it makes me think, is the Spanish version full of random English words then? Just for the sake of it? Because it's like, why? I mean, people do this when they're learning a language. They might throw it out there, but that isn't the way it's being conveyed in The Old Man and the Sea. Whatever, you know. I can go on about the religious connotations. They're really obvious. I'm not impressed with that, in all honesty. I actually am at a point where I kind of think Judeo-Christian mindsets are so embedded in our psyches and have so much overlap with the hero's journey kind of notion. Even Jesus himself was a kind of hero's journey. In a way, it's not quite the same, but the whole Christian destination toward heaven, if you will, could be construed of as, look at this life that we're in and this journey that we're on. No, it doesn't really work, really, because or it's a mistake of our own innate natural design to suddenly think like, I must be here for a reason, and then it adds a deific element, because it's like, why have I been brought here, my father? You know, all that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, when the old man's struggling to pull the fish and then his hands are bleeding, oh my God, who does this remind me of? And all this kind of stuff. I think even the name Santiago is mentioned in some gospel or whatever. And yeah, of course, his sacrifice and all this kind of stuff, because he tries to like basically give his own life in order to achieve this goal. He does also say prayers and do all this stuff, and you know, it's like, yeah, okay, that's really fucking obvious. Like, it's not. And in fact, it's almost so deliberate that I don't know how you wouldn't pick up on that, and I don't really know what else I'm supposed to be taken aback by. It's hugely repetitive, cyclically so, you know, to the point where it's like, maybe as a symbol for the like, oh look, it's just life going round and round and round, and and you're reading something that goes round and round and round. It's like, look at the mirroring here and all that kind of stuff. Okay, fine. Ultimately, because I'll just go off on an absolute tangent about stuff that's probably non-related to this book, but yeah, The Old Man and the Sea I think of as a novella of reduction. Everything about it is stripped down to the bare bones, quite literally, like the fucking poor fish at the end, basically. The prose, the dialogue, the structure, the plotting, even the simplicity of the religious crossover and things like that. Like, it's almost stripped of any and all enjoyment, actually, as well. And yeah, in the end, I can respect Hemingway for what he was trying to do here, but I ultimately have no respect for what he accomplished, which is a kind of strange position to be in. And it's not because of what I previously mentioned, nor the reductive element of the novella, but more to do with the fact that I think really what he's getting at is the futility of existence. Santiago is one of life's losers. He's you and me. Like, he's your average Joe, you know, average Santiago, if you will. And yeah, everything about his existence has been about achieving a certain, accomplishment or goal. And this is just a depiction of somebody who tries and ultimately fails. And that's what his whole life has been. There's a reason he's called unlucky. His has been a life of many a failure, essentially. And what I think the point Hemingway was trying to make was life is futile. But again, I've read a lot of existential, nihilistic and philosophical novels, and the Tartar Steppe ultimately has a very similar message at the end of it, and it's written beautifully. This is written with as if it had the intention of being like a splinter in your eye, where you're just bored, like it's tedious. And I can't really have much admiration for something that seems to be willingly boring me to tears or trying to send me to sleep. There were elements of it there where I thought it did create the monotony of existence in a way, where it did feel very much like this formulaic sense where you get up in the morning, you go to the dock, you get on the boat, you go out to sea, you try to catch a fish, you fail, you go home, you go to bed, you talk about baseball, you talk about fishing, you talk about God, and it's like, and everything feels very prodded. You just keep going along, hoping that one day something will be accomplished. But really, in the end, nothing will, and yet you carry on anyway. In some sense, maybe this was Hemingway's suicide note. I think that's all I've got for you on this one. There might have been a couple of things I wanted to add, but nah, not really. Oh yeah, there was something. One of these things, or a couple of things. This piece, I believe, or maybe this was in the past, but it probably still comes up, is something that I think a lot of kids in America are kind of forced to read, probably in like 10th grade or something like that. Maybe at the ages of, say, 13, 14. It's a terrible choice of a book to read because it's too dull. Like, I don't see how it's going to engage any 13, 14, 15-year-old, especially boys. Girls, maybe, but then the only female character in it is the sea. Like, literally, it's just like that typical Hemingway macho bullshit, basically. So, yeah, it's no wonder that it has quite a mixed reception on something like Goodreads, because not only does, being kind of obliged to read something because of education put a kind of negative tint on any particular book, but one such as this, I kind of think is an odd choice. Over here in Britain, we're given Lord of the Flies, way better. That's actually genuinely a really good book as well, and it has all of this religious undertones and messages and paradigms with democracy and how weak it really is, that kind of thing. And it has a lot of carnage, which makes it fun. This has a tiny bit of carnage, and really I think I've overgassed that just because there's just nothing going on a lot of the time. And that can be fine. Like in the Tartar Steppe, there's basically nothing happening. It's a guy who goes to the Tartar Steppe to defend his country and fight the good battle, and the battle never comes. But when you're reading it, you see the passage of time and the meaninglessness of how life kind of plays this weird trick on you. Whilst there's elements of that in The Old Man and the Sea, I feel like I'm always defending it, even though I'm slagging it off, if that makes sense. It's like I'm really picking at things to try and make this seem more interesting than it is. And the final point I want to make is, like, I saw a few people saying stuff like, oh, if you can't find the story in the plot, then you're looking in the wrong place, for the story somewhere else and all this. And if you look at like the themes or the symbolism, it's like Hemingway is the big writer. He is the marlin fish. he represents what all writers want. So Santiago is just your average Joe writer, and all this nonsense basically. Or you'll get people saying that you've just missed the point, which I'm starting to really suspect is a way of people precariously feeling intelligent because they try to defend somebody such as Hemingway, who has this massive reputation and whatnot. And it's a way of using them as a shield for their own inadequacies and being on the side that where they can't really be proved wrong, because unless the author themselves says, no, what are you fucking talking about? As Hemingway said in an interview, it was like, the old man is an old man, the sea is the sea, blah, blah, blah. Everything is what it is, except for those who know how to look beyond, or some bullshit that he added at the end. And it's like, I've got to wonder a little bit whether Hemingway was trolling. You know, there's a lot of academics and critics who've laid the same claim towards someone like Nietzsche, for instance, where you've got a whole siege of people who've, you know, analysed and overanalyzed and analysed the very analysis and all this kind of stuff about one paragraph or whatever. But he was also known to be a bit of a prankster at times, to be kind of tongue-in-cheek. So I wonder if Hemingway in that interview was being tongue-in-cheek, and whether or not The Old Man and the Sea is kind of a mockery of literature itself, because by doing that very reductive thing, by taking away from all the joy of reading and just, you know, basically having everything just as it is, then yeah, it's like, I can't help but wonder, maybe he is just doing this basically. And I think that maybe because if you do happen to be someone who writes quite a lot, there does become a point where you start to question, like, what is it that I'm actually even trying to do here? Am I just trying to entertain people? Am I trying to give a message? Who the fuck am I to think that I even have anything to say? And all that type of stuff. And maybe there was this whole, not necessarily imposter syndrome, but he probably still felt fraudulent, because if he was chasing this dream of catching the marlin fame and all that, and then when he got it, everything was the same, but suddenly everyone's looking at him as if he knows what he's talking about, it could just be a massive kind of satirical self takedown as well as audience takedown, where it's just like, this is all a big fucking joke, you know?